The reason lending money to someone you love destroys the relationship is not because the borrower is ungrateful. It is because the moment money moves between people who love each other, it does not stay as money. It becomes the thing Midas discovered when he reached for his daughter and found gold where warmth used to be. You were never lending money. You were converting the relationship. By the end of this teaching, you will know exactly why that conversion happens and what the ancient code reveals about protecting the people you love without destroying the wealth it took you years to build. A prayer for wisdom with money and with the people you love awaits you at the close. Here is the diagnosis, and it is brutal. The world tells you that generosity means giving what someone needs the moment they need it. The world tells you that refusing someone you love when they are desperate reveals something cold at your core. The world tells you a real friend, a real sibling, a real partner reaches into their pocket without hesitation, because love is supposed to be bigger than money. The world is giving you a map that leads directly off a cliff. This is not generosity. This is a transaction disguised as love. When the person closest to you calls and says they need money, $2,000, $5,000, even $500, the feeling that arrives is not financial. It is emotional. It is loyalty. The fear of being seen as the person who refused when it mattered. The memory of every sacrifice they made. Every moment they showed up without being asked. None of those feelings have anything to do with money. All of them are about to make a financial decision on your behalf. Faster than your judgment can intervene. That is the trap. Not that the people you love are trying to take from you. The trap is that the financial decision and the emotional pressure arrive at exactly the same moment, wrapped in the same request, and you can only consciously feel one of them. Most people who lend money to family or friends do not experience it as a financial transaction. They experience it as a relationship decision. They believe saying yes to the loan is saying yes to the person, to the history, to everything built between them. They are wrong. And the cost arrives later at the dinner table where something in the conversation has shifted, in the text that goes unanswered because the person you helped cannot see your name without the weight of an open account, pressing down on the moment. This is not a financial problem. This is a conversion problem. The story of Midas encodes this truth in a way no modern financial book has matched. And once you understand what the ancient story is actually saying, you will never look at a request to borrow money from someone you love the same way again. Ovid recorded the moment in the Metamorphoses, Book 11, with a precision that reads less like mythology and more like a case study in unintended consequences. Midas had been granted his wish by Dionysus. Everything he touched would turn to gold. He tested it on a stone. Gold. A branch from the garden. Gold. He moved through his palace converting surface after surface, convinced he had solved the fundamental problem of wealth permanently. Then he sat down to eat. The bread hardened in his hands before it reached his mouth. The wine solidified in the cup. And when his daughter came running to him when she saw his distress and moved toward him, the way people who love each other move toward one another when something is wrong, Midas reached out to receive her, and she became gold. Notice what Ovid does not say. He does not say Midas was careless or cruel. He says Midas reached out, and the mechanism that had been activated did what mechanisms do. Without asking whether this particular contact was appropriate, without pausing to assess what it was about to convert, it converted what it touched. When you introduce money into a relationship built on love, you activate that same mechanism, not intentionally, not with any desire to cause damage. You activate it the moment the transfer happens, and once active, it converts what surrounds it. Trust becomes calculation. Affection becomes obligation. The ease of being in the same room with someone you care about becomes a background register of what is owed and when. Midas did not know his daughter would be the one to make the mechanism visible. You do not know which birthday call, which holiday dinner, which ordinary Wednesday exchange will be the one where the conversion becomes undeniable. But the mechanism is running from the first day the money changes hands. Herodotus, in Histories, Book 1, records the encounter between Croesus of Lydia and Solon of Athens. Croesus was the richest ruler the ancient world had produced. He received Solon, the Athenian lawgiver, one of the 7 sages of Greece, and asked him who was the happiest man he had ever met in all his travels. Croesus expected to hear his own name. What Solon said instead is recorded with the precision Herodotus reserves for moments that carry instruction across centuries. Call no man happy until he is dead. Not because life offers nothing worth valuing, because the foundation matters more than what is built on top of it. Wealth without wisdom about what wealth does inside your essential relationships is not security. It is a mechanism waiting for the moment it reveals itself. The king who extends his gold into the relationships that hold his world together has not secured his world. He has introduced the mechanism into the one place he believed was fully protected from it. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments. I want to see how far this ancient wisdom is traveling across the world. Here is where most people miss entirely. The loan does not damage the relationship when the borrower fails to repay. The loan changes the relationship the moment it is made, not when the deadline arrives, not when the uncomfortable conversation becomes unavoidable. The moment the money transfers, the architecture of the relationship changes, not gradually, immediately, and structurally. Before the loan exists, the two of you operate inside a relationship with its own logic, its own unspoken rules, its own accumulated history. You call without agenda. You show up without keeping score. The relationship has a freedom in it, a freedom that exists specifically because there is no open claim between you. Nothing is owed. Nothing is pending. The instant money enters, a new layer is added, and that layer does not coexist peacefully with what was there before. Every conversation after the loan carries a background frequency that was absent before. The person you lent money to cannot fully settle into your presence, because your presence is now connected, whether either of you names it or not, to an obligation that remains unresolved. Charlie Munger said it plainly: "Show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome." What almost no one calculates before lending money to someone they love is the incentive structure they are creating the moment the transfer is made. You have just given someone you care about a powerful, ongoing incentive to manage their proximity to you. Every time they are in your presence, the debt is also there. Every time a repayment window passes without action, shame accumulates on top of the principal. And shame does not produce openness. Shame produces distance. It produces shorter calls, slower replies, the gradual withdrawal of someone who, before the loan, was reliably present. Notice what Munger's principle reveals here specifically. The borrower's primary incentive has shifted. It is no longer to maintain the relationship as it was. It is to manage the discomfort of owing. And managing that discomfort, in close relationships, looks like exactly what you eventually experience: someone who is harder to reach, less open, always slightly further away than they used to be. Stop and ask yourself something honest. Think of the last time you owed money to a specific person whose face you know, not a bank, a person. Did your behavior toward them change while that debt was open, even slightly? The mechanism runs in both directions. The lender scans for signals. The borrower manages the presentation. The relationship that used to breathe freely is now managing itself. And a relationship managing itself has already lost what made it what it was. Here is where the trap becomes invisible. When you lend money to someone you love, you do not create one debt, you create two. The financial debt is visible. The emotional debt is invisible, and it grows on its own schedule, regardless of what happens with the money. The borrower carries both. They carry the number, and they carry the weight of what asking costs them personally. For most people who value their dignity, asking for money from someone they love is among the most difficult things they can be driven to do. And now they must face that person at every gathering, every ordinary encounter, carrying the memory of what it costs to ask, and knowing the person across from them carries it too. Aristotle, in Politics, Book 1, wrote precisely about what he called krematistike, the accumulation of wealth in ways that corrupt natural relationships. He was not writing only about greed. He was writing about the category error of inserting financial logic into relational spaces not built to hold it. The relationship between people who love each other was not designed to carry the architecture of formal debt and repayment. When you force it to, you deform both. Notice what Aristotle identifies precisely. It is not the amount that determines the damage. It is the category. A financial instrument placed inside a relational space, operating by entirely different rules, puts both under pressure. Neither was built to sustain. Benjamin Graham wrote that the investor's chief problem, and even his worst enemy, is likely to be himself. He was writing about markets. The principle extends further. When you lend, because emotional pressure overrides financial judgment, when the person in front of you is more real than the analysis you need to complete, you work against yourself in two directions at once. Neither your money nor your relationship receives adequate protection. But here is the deeper principle Midas discovered the hard way. The ancient world maintained a distinction. The modern world has nearly collapsed. The distinction between giving and lending. In the Greek philosophical tradition, these were not two versions of the same act. They were structurally different acts, with entirely different consequences for the relationships through which they moved. A gift is complete the moment it leaves your hands. No expectation crosses back. No open account is created. A gift is finished. The relationship absorbs the generosity and moves forward unencumbered. A loan is never finished until the obligation is settled. It lives inside the relationship as an open claim. And open claims between people who love each other do not rest quietly. They grow heavier over time, developing a gravity that bends every interaction toward them even when both parties pretend otherwise. Most people who lend to someone they love tell themselves the loan structure respects the borrower more than a gift would. What they miss is that the gift, given completely and without expectation, closes the account before it can open. The loan defers the cost of the asking across every future interaction. The dignity the loan was supposed to protect is quietly eroded by every subsequent encounter, carrying the weight of an unresolved claim. The ancient wisdom is not reckless generosity. It is precise. If you can give without expectation, give. If you cannot, be honest about it. But do not construct a loan and call it generosity, because the mechanism you activate is identical regardless of the name. And the first loan is never only the first loan. It establishes a precedent. When someone you love returns with a second request, whether the first was repaid or not, you are no longer making a fresh decision. You are renegotiating an established pattern. They know you will consider it. They know the framing that worked. They know which emotional registers are effective, because the first request revealed them. This is not deliberate manipulation. This is how patterns form in close relationships, and why each repetition costs more to revise than the one before. The trap is not the amount. The trap is the invisible contract you signed before you understood its terms. If this teaching is shifting something in your understanding, if you can see now that there is a different way to build, tap the like button right now. It helps this message reach the people who need it most. And if you want more of the wisdom the Midas Code contains, subscribe to this channel. There is much more coming. Practical application begins with a single, honest question you must answer before responding to any request to borrow. Step 1. Apply the gift test before you respond. Before agreeing to lend any amount to anyone you love, ask yourself this. If I knew with certainty this money would never return, would I still hand it over? If the answer is yes, you have a path forward. If the answer is no, you have already made your decision, you simply have not said it out loud. The loan is not a way to say yes while protecting yourself. It is a delayed no that costs more than the principal. Step 2. If you help, give completely and change the frame before the money moves. If you have concluded you can afford to help and genuinely want to, make the structural change before the transfer. Tell the person you love you are giving the money, not lending it. No expectation of return. This single act, made explicit before the money moves, removes the mechanism from the equation. It closes the account before it opens. The relationship gains evidence of genuine care and moves forward without an embedded claim. Step 3. Establish the Midas boundary before the request arrives. The most powerful moment to define how money operates in your relationships is before any request arrives, not in the middle of one. Once the request is in the room, clarity is under pressure. The Midas boundary is a decision made in advance, what you can genuinely afford to give as a gift. Anything beyond that is not available, not as a loan, not with the best intentions, not regardless of the urgency. Set it now. Hold it when the pressure arrives. Step 4. Separate the relationship from the financial request, without guilt. When someone you love asks to borrow money, they are making two simultaneous requests: financial help, and that you absorb the emotional weight of their situation by agreeing. You can respond honestly to both without accepting the financial structure they propose. Saying no to the loan is not saying no to the person. It is a protection of both. Practice separating those two things now, while you are not under pressure, so the language is available when you need it. Step 5. If the loan already exists, have the honest conversation this week. If you are already inside a loan arrangement with someone you love, continued silence is the most damaging option available. Have the conversation. Either convert the debt to a gift and release the obligation formally, or establish a clear repayment structure with a realistic timeline. Any explicit resolution is better than the ambiguity of an open account that neither party will name. The story of Midas ends with a prayer to Dionysus to reverse the gift. The reversal came, but what the mechanism had already cost could not be fully recovered. The lesson is not that every activated mechanism destroys permanently. The lesson is that acting from the right principle earlier costs far less than reversing a conversion that has had time to settle. This is not complicated. This is ancient wisdom rewritten in the language your situation requires. If what you have heard has shifted something in the way you see your relationships and your finances, there is a reason for that. This is not advice dressed in old clothing. This is the code the ancient world embedded in its most enduring stories, because they had watched the mechanism run across too many relationships to leave the principle unnamed. This channel exists to bring that code into your hands, one teaching at a time. What comes next will go even deeper into the financial principles encoded in the ancient code. There are teachings on the trap of comparison, on the habits that compound in silence for years before the results become visible, on the mechanics of wealth built slowly and held permanently. Most of the people around you will never encounter these lessons. Subscribe now, and you will be notified every time a new teaching is released. Hit the subscribe button before you close this window. The next lesson is ready, and the person prepared for it will not miss it. If this teaching helped you see something more clearly, share it with one person in your life who is navigating this. Not to assign blame, to offer protection. Before we close, I want to invite you into something different. This prayer is not a formality. It is an alignment. Close your eyes if you can, or simply align your thoughts with mine right now. What comes next is not just words. It is an invitation. Father, we come before you with open hands and honest hearts. We have spent time today with a truth many of us recognize because we have already lived it. We have lent money to people we loved and watched the relationship change in ways we did not anticipate and could not explain. We said yes when the most loving answer would have been no. We used money as the language of love, believing it would bring us closer, and we paid a price we did not know we were agreeing to. We confess that we have allowed emotional pressure to override the wisdom available to us if we had paused long enough to find it. We confess that we have confused genuine generosity with the inability to disappoint the people we love. We confess that we activated mechanisms in our closest relationships without understanding what we were setting in motion, and that the cost was sometimes greater than any number we could attach. We ask now for a new kind of clarity, not the hardness that guards wealth at the cost of love, but the wisdom to love the people in our lives from a position of honesty, to give from overflow rather than fear, to hold limits, not to protect accounts, but to protect the relationships that no money can replace once they are broken by an unresolved claim. We declare that we are not driven by the pressure of the moment. We are stewards of what we have been entrusted with, stewards of the resources that took time and discipline to build, and stewards of the relationships that matter more than any number on a balance sheet. We ask for courage to say no, when no is the most protective thing we can offer. We ask for wisdom to know the difference between giving and lending before the money moves. We ask for healing in every relationship where money has already created distance healing, that requires not full repayment, but honesty and the willingness to begin again from a place of truth. We ask for eyes that see our financial lives clearly, and hearts that love without needing to prove it through what we hand over. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen. Go in peace. The wealth you protect with wisdom is worth more than any loan you could extend, and the relationships you guard with honesty are worth more than any amount you could give. You are free.